The Battle of Plataea was fought in August 479 BC during the Second Persian invasion of Greece. The previous year in 480, the Persian Empire of Xerxes I invaded Greece, crossing the Hellespont with a massive army determined to conquer Greece. The situation seemed desperate as the disjointed Greek city-states scrambled to organize a defense, while some did not resist at all and bent the knee to Xerxes, joining with the Persians. As the huge Persian army moved south, a small allied Greek army led by the Spartan king, Leonidas, moved to block the pass of Thermopylae, a major strategic choke point, while the mostly Athenian navy sailed to block the straits of Artemisium. When Xerxes encountered the Greeks blocking the pass, he waited for 4 days before sending his troops to attack. During the ensuing battle, the outnumbered Greek army held the pass at Thermopylae for 3 days before they were finally outflanked by the Persians. In a dramatic last stand, they were surrounded and annihilated. Meanwhile, the Battle of Artemisium ended in a stalemate. When news of the defeat at Thermopylae reached the Greek fleet there, they also retreated. The Greek defeat at Thermopylae was nothing short of a disaster. Although they had succeeded in holding off the Persians for 7 days, the Persian army, now momentarily unopposed, proceeded to sack and burn the Boeotian cities that had not surrendered, Plataea and Thespiae, before also looting and occupying the evacuated city of Athens. The remaining Greek forces prepared to defend the Isthmus of Corinth, hoping to spare the Peloponnese from the same fate as Athens. The Greek fleet, meanwhile, was withdrawn to Salamis Island. Although heavily outnumbered, the Greeks were persuaded by the Athenian general, Themistocles, to provoke the Persian fleet to battle again. The Persian king Xerxes was determined to seek a final crushing defeat of the Greeks, and in his haste, ordered the Persian navy to row into the straits of Salamis, where the Greeks were waiting for them. The Greek fleet scored a decisive victory, inflicting heavy losses on the Persian fleet. Following the defeat of his navy at Salamis, Xerxes, not wanting his army to become trapped in Europe, retreated back to Asia. The Persian king left a contingent under the command of Mardonius, tasked with completing the conquest of Greece. After sacking Athens, Mardonius departed with his Persian army from Attica and headed north to spend the winter in Thessaly. The Athenians then reoccupied their destroyed city over the winter, while both sides hunkered down, unwilling to risk battle. Mardonius made several attempts to subdue the Greeks through promises and diplomacy, but all of these attempts failed. In the spring, the Persians marched south again. Athens was again evacuated, and once again the Persians began looting and burning Athens. Athens, Megara, and Plataea sent diplomats to Sparta, asking for aid. According to Herodotus, the Spartans were celebrating the festival of Hyacinthus and delayed making a decision, but were finally persuaded by Achilles of Tegea, who pointed out the danger to all of Greece if they did not help the Athenians. The Spartans were convinced and ordered 5,000 Spartan hoplites to march before dawn. When Mardonius learned of this Spartan force, he finished the destruction of Athens, destroying and burning whatever was left. He then retreated towards Thebes, hoping to lure the Greeks into territory more suitable for his cavalry. The Persians created a fortified encampment on the north bank of the Asopus River in Boeotia. The Athenians sent 8,000 hoplites and 600 Plataean exiles to rendezvous with the allied army. The combined army then marched through Boeotia, across the passes of Mount Cithaeron, arriving near the Persian position by Plataea. The Greeks took up position on high ground opposite the Persian lines. The Greek forces were overall commanded by the Spartan royal regent, Pausanias. Under normal circumstances, this honor would have been given to Pleistarchus, the son of Leonidas, the deceased Spartan king. However, he was still just a boy and had not yet come of age. Also with the Spartans was Aristodemus, lone survivor of the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. He survived because he was dismissed from the army by Leonidas due to an eye infection. When he returned to Sparta, he was branded a coward by his countrymen, and for this, he was eager to redeem himself. The Athenians were led by Aristides, a veteran of the Battle of Marathon, and a man described by Herodotus as, quote, the best and most honorable man in Athens. The Plataean contingent was led by Erimnestos, also a veteran of the Battle of Marathon. The Greeks arrayed themselves with the Spartans and Tegeans on the right, the Athenians on the left, and the Plataeans, Megarians, Boeotians, Thessalians, Potidæans, Eretrians, Corinthians, and other Greek states in the center. Mardonius's army lined up with 40,000 Persian troops on the right, facing the Spartans, and in the center, 20,000 Bactrians, Indians, and Sakai. On the left, opposite the Athenians, were 20,000 Greek allies of the Persians, including Macedonians, Thessalians, Boeotians, and Thebes. The Persian cavalry, which also consisted of Bactrians, Indians, and Sakai, numbered around 5,000. During the last few days before the battle, Greek reinforcements continued to stream in, until the combined Greek army numbered somewhere between 80 and 100,000 men. Herodotus records the number of Persians at 300,000, but modern historians estimate it to be lower, perhaps even equal or only slightly higher than the number of Greeks. Much like the Battle of Marathon a decade earlier, the hours and days before the Battle of Plataea resembled a tense and prolonged stalemate, in which neither side was willing to make the first move. The tactical reasons for this were similar to Marathon. The Greek hoplites did not want to risk being outflanked or surrounded by the Persian cavalry, nor did they want to risk attacking or attempting a river crossing across the Asopus, while the lightly armored Persian infantry also did not want to launch a direct assault on the Greek hoplites' well-defended position on the hill. Something had to give. In an attempt to lure the Greeks away from their defensive position, Mardonius sent his entire force of cavalry against them. Led by the Persian commander Mecistius, the cavalry first charged the Megarians, who were hard-pressed by the charges, and sent word to the other Greek generals to send help. The Athenians volunteered, sending 300 picked hoplites to join the fight against the cavalry. After resisting several charges, the cavalry commander's horse was struck by an arrow and threw Mecistius to the ground. He was immediately swarmed by the Athenians. He wore a purple tunic with a cuirass of golden scales, and his armor was so thick that stabbing his body had almost no effect. One of the Greeks noticed this and stabbed him in the eye, finally killing him. When the rest of the Persian horsemen saw what happened, they all rode together to recover the dead body, attacking the Athenians fiercely. There was a bitter fight over the dead body, but the Greeks eventually prevailed, and the the rest of the cavalry retreated, reporting back to Mardonius and the main Persian camp. According to Herodotus, when the cavalry returned to the camp, quote, Mardonius and the whole army mourned deeply for Mecisteus, cutting their own hair and the hair of their horses and beasts of burden, and lamenting loudly. The sound of this was heard all over Boeotia, for a man was dead who, next to Mardonius, was most esteemed by all of Persia and the king. End quote. The Greeks, emboldened by this initial success, moved forward to a new position more suited to make camp and with better access to water. In response, Mardonius brought his men up to the Esopus and arrayed them for battle, opposite to the Greeks. However, once again, neither side would attack because, as claimed by Herodotus, both sides received bad omens. For 8 days, the two armies remained in a standoff, during which more Greek troops continued to arrive, and Mardonius meanwhile sent his cavalry out on additional sorties to raid and harass the Greek supply lines. One of these raids succeeded in blocking Greek access to a nearby spring, which was the only source of water for the Greek army. The lack of food and water soon made the Greek position unsustainable, so under the cover of darkness, they retreated to a position in front of Plataea. However, they failed to coordinate their movements together, and the Greek line ended up fragmented, with the Spartans and Tegeans falling back uphill to a position by the temple of Demeter, and the Athenians and other Greeks retreating directly towards Plataea. Mardonius observed the Greeks apparently abandoning their positions, and it looked as if the Greeks were in full retreat. So he set off in immediate pursuit. The entire Persian army moved forward in haste, charging the Greeks. The Spartans and Tegeans were first assaulted by the Persian cavalry. The Persian infantry made their way forward, not far behind the cavalry. They planted their shields in the ground and began shooting arrows at the Greeks. Under pressure from the cavalry and the archers, Pausanias sent a messenger to the Athenians, asking them to reinforce the Spartan position. Before they could march to the Spartans' aid, they were themselves attacked by the phalanx of Thebes and the other Greek allies of the Persians opposite to them. The Athenians were therefore unable to send any assistance, and the Spartans and Tegeans were left to defend against the brunt of the Persian attack alone. According to Herodotus, hard-pressed and starting to take casualties from wave after wave of Persian arrows, Pausanias, quote, lifted up his eyes to the temple of Hera at Plataea, and called upon the goddess, praying that they may not be disappointed in their hope. While he was still praying, the men of Tegea and Arcadians leapt out before the rest and charged the Persians. Pausanias finished his prayer. Now having received favorable omens, the Spartans too charged the Persians, and the Persians met them, throwing away their bows. Herodotus' account continued, quote, neither less valorous nor weaker, but they had no armor. Moreover, since they were unskilled and no match for their adversaries in craft, they would rush out singly and in tens or in groups, great or small, hurling themselves on the Spartans and so perishing. Aristodemus, the lone survivor of Thermopylae, eager to redeem his name, charged the Persian formation by himself, killing in a wild, untamed fury before being overwhelmed and cut down. The other Spartans agreed he had redeemed himself, but awarded him no special honor for not fighting with discipline and carelessly throwing his life away. The Persians, Spartans, and Tegeans engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The fight was long, but the Persian infantry were no match for the heavy Greek phalanx. Soon the Greeks began pushing the Persians back, penetrating deep into the Persian lines. The Persians tried to break the Greek spears by grabbing hold of them, but the Greeks simply switched to their swords. On the opposite side of the battlefield, the clash between the Athenians and the Thebans also continued. The Athenians soon gained the upper hand on that flank also. According to Herodotus, the Greeks fighting for the Persians deliberately fought badly. Mardonius himself fought in the battle, riding a white horse surrounded by his bodyguard, who were described by Herodotus as, quote, 1,000 picked men who were the flower of the Persians. Mardonius and his men fought tenaciously, and while the Persian general was present, the Persians stood their ground, cutting down many Spartans and Tegeans. Ultimately, unable to resist the might of the Spartan phalanx, Mardonius was finally killed by a Spartan soldier named Arimnestus. With Mardonius dead, the Persians now began to flee, although the general's bodyguard remained, and they were eventually annihilated. Soon the Persian rout became widespread, with many Persians fleeing disorderly and barricading themselves inside the walls of their camp. Some Persians, 40,000 according to Herodotus, ran away from the battlefield in a different direction on the road to Thessaly, hoping to escape eventually across the Hellespont, back to Asia. The Athenians also triumphed against the Thebans. The Greeks fighting for the Persians also retreated, but ran in a different direction from the other two previously mentioned groups, and were able to escape with no further losses. The other Greeks, who were initially arrayed in the center and had not taken part in the main battle, then stormed the Persian camp. The Persians initially defended the wall successfully, but it was eventually breached, and the Persians inside were slaughtered. According to Herodotus, 257,000 Persians were killed, and only 43,000 survived, while the Greeks as a whole lost only 159 men. Modern consensus, however, puts the number of actual Persian dead closer to 50 to 90,000. Plutarch put the Greek casualties at 1,360, while both Ephorus and Diodorus recorded the Greek casualties at 10,000. The Greeks had won a great victory. The significance of the Greek victory at Plataea was summarized by Herodotus. Quote, "On that day the Spartans, as the oracle had foretold, gained from Mardonius their full measure of vengeance for the slaying of Leonidas, and the most glorious of victories of all which we know was won by Pausanias. In the army of the Greeks there was one, Lampon, son of Pythias, who approached Pausanias after the battle and said, quote, 'You have done a great deed of surpassing greatness and glory. God has granted to you in saving Hellas to have won greater renown than any Greek whom we know. But now you must finish what remains for the rest, so that your fame may be greater still, and that no barbarian will hereafter begin doing reckless deeds against the Greeks.' When Leonidas was killed at Thermopylae, Mardonius and Xerxes cut off his head and set it on a pole. Make them a like return, and you will win praise from all the Spartans and the rest of Hellas besides. For if you impale Mardonius, you will be avenged for your father's brother, Leonidas." Pausanias heard this and refused, reacting in disgust, saying, quote, "That would be an act more proper for barbarians than for Greeks. As for Leonidas, whom you would have me avenge, I think that he has received a full measure of vengeance. The uncounted souls of these that you see have done honor to him, and the rest of those who died at Thermopylae. The Greeks created tombs for their dead, and Pausanias made a proclamation that no man should touch the spoils, and ordered the Helots to gather all of the loot. After this was done, the Greeks set apart a tithe for the god of Delphi, a bronze column in the shape of intertwined snakes called the Serpent Column was created from melted down Persian weapons acquired from the Persian camp and erected at Delphi. The statue commemorated all of the Greek city-states that had participated in the battle, listing them on the column. They also created statues of Zeus and Poseidon, and when this was completed, they divided the spoils that remained. Occurring the same day as Plataea, the Battle of Mycale, a Greek fleet under the Spartan king Leotycides sailed to Samos and destroyed the remnants of the Persian fleet, crippling Xerxes' navy and marking the rise of Greek naval power. With the double victories at Plataea and Mycale, the second Persian invasion of Greece was over. Greece had once again triumphed, and the Achaemenids would never again attempt a large-scale invasion of Greece. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. See you next time.